author of the book, Win the Relationship, Not the Deal. And the best advice I ever got was, is it more important to be right or get what you want? And for me, it's about getting what I want.
Is it more important to be right than get? Come on, you don't just want to be right, Casey. Come on, man.
No, that ego. That means we have ego issues.
Yeah.
And there's times I want to be right, but there's times I have to say that advice and really keep me grounded on what am I arguing about? Is this really a big deal? I use that advice big time in my sales career in the staffing consulting world. I use it in my marriage for all the dads out there or husbands out there. But it's hard to get sometimes, hard to receive sometimes, but I think I found a lot of value in that advice.
Yeah. Who gave you that advice?
My first boss out of college, when I worked for a company called Barcodes West. They were labels, but I called them stickers, which showed my maturity level there at the first job out of school. And he asked me, he says, "Hey, do you want to be right to get what you want?" And his name's Doug Arthur, and then Dana Milkey and a guy named Matt Sorotsky. They all kind of co-shared that advice 20-something years ago.
Wow. Wow. And you took it right away, or was it something you had to learn over time?
I definitely took it, but then there was times where I would, fall in the trap of letting my ego get in the way. And then he would say, "Hey, Tony, you want to be right to get what you want?" And I'm like, "God dang it. You're right. You're right." And so now, and I use that advice forever in corporate, and then now in the coaching space I'm doing. And I tell myself it all the time. And sometimes it's painful to hear, but it's super, super, super powerful.
Cool, man. Cool. So did that influence the book at all? Did that influence Win the Relationship at all? Or is that kind of not kind of just loosely connected?
No, that's a good question, Phil. It definitely did, because when the name of the book hit me like lightning, kind of like when you ever seen Christmas Vacation,
Oh yeah, sure.
when Griswold sees the tree and it just like glows. Like that happened when I was in Dallas working with a younger sales team, and I was asking them, "People, do you want?" I expect us to try to win every deal, but we're not. I'd rather us win people. It's more important for us to win the relationship, not the deal. And I was like, "That's it." And so I think that same mindset of win the, not the, it's like when my dad, rest in peace, he passed away in December. I wrote at the end of the book about, is it more importantly to win the relationship win the relationship with my dad or the dementia, and you can't reason with dementia. I learned that the hard way, and it was a long journey. So I definitely feel it not only to help me personally in my life, as I mentioned, with marriage, but with my father, and also just in customer relationships. Like I can be strong arm the customer. In the end, I win a transaction, but in the end, that client now has a bad experience, and they're going to tell everybody. And to me, it wasn't. So anyway, long-winded answer. It's definitely a hot button, a passion for me, and it definitely helped me write the book.
Cool, man. That's awesome. Yeah. That's good stuff, bro. I completely agree the way you explain it. It makes sense to me. And, even before you did, it totally makes sense. And I forget that often. My wife she's not far from here. She'd probably hit me in the head and remind me of that too. So that's good stuff, man. So cool, man. So let's talk about the book, because there's so much here in the book. I mean, it's a short read. It's not real long, which I loved. Six beautiful lessons in here. So let's talk about some of those lessons inside there, Casey. One of the ones that I really resonated with is the difference between hearing and listening, because so many miss that. And I'll tell you what, I have to remind my 6-year-old of that sometimes, that you might have heard dad, but you certainly weren't listening to me, son. So talk to me about that, Casey.
Yeah, I mean, I learned this sarcastic phrase from a guy named John Kaplan, who's a mentor of mine in my life. And he said there's this thing called seller deficit disorder. And he said the two symptoms of this ravishing disease that will put salespeople in the hospital, you'll get airlifted, is number one answer is clients say they say they don't like about salespeople is they don't listen, and they don't understand my business. And too often sellers sell product guides, scripts, what their boss tells them to say, versus you'll be definitely hearing because you're only thinking about yourself, and versus listening requires intention. Put the phone down, turn notifications off on your phone. I'll never shout out to the people who don't get an iWatch. I love Apple, but I'm not biting the bullet. I like the old school watch where it doesn't buzz and I don't go like this and send a message to the person I'm talking to that I got somewhere to go. And listening's a gift. It's I always say, kind of create those Maya Angelou moments, not what you said, why you said, about how you make people feel. And I think that from speaking, but you also can give that gift of listening. And when someone is looking deep in your eyes, they got all notifications off. They're looking at you. They're intently looking at you. They're asking follow-up questions based on what you just heard. It's an amazing feeling. And I know that as I said, I'm hopefully people in the audience are thinking back like, yeah, because I know when they don't listen, everybody knows that feeling. You're
Mm.
saying a couple things, or they're saying something back to you, like, wait a minute. I think I use a tech support answer in the book. When I called tech support, you could tell they're reading from a script and had no idea what to say, and just rubs you the wrong way. And so I think when you focus on listening, which is a skill you can practice, it just will differentiate you big time in the relationships, professionally and personally, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's super true, man. That's super true. It's so interesting. You pick on the iWatch. So I'll tell you what, I have an iWatch. You know why I have an iWatch? The only reason I have an iWatch is right now it is because it connects me to my friends via the fitness app. So I can connect to fitness. But otherwise, to your point, like I have all, it doesn't buzz, it doesn't do anything,
Hmm.
but it does connect with that. So you can, any tool can be used for good or for evil. So I'm totally with you there, buddy. That's a good one, and I agree that listening is it's a powerful skill, and
Hmm.
it's something that we can absolutely do with so many of us. So we listen, but so what, right? I mean, don't we have to do something with that? I mean, you talk about the power of the CRM, and many sales reps, man, they're not bought in, bro. They're
Mm-mm.
like, you know what? I'd rather be dead than use Salesforce.
Yeah, because it's only for my boss, right? Because he or she just is checking up on me and managing me and micromanaging me, and they want me to do all these things, and I don't have time. And I've heard every excuse in the book, Phil. Every excuse in the book. I can tell you that using a CRM for me made me look like I went to Harvard, and I did not go to Harvard. It so many times clients would say, "How did you remember that? How did you remember my son was on the bowling team? How did you remember my daughter is a lacrosse player? How did you remember I go to vacation in Michigan? How did you remember my brother-in-law buys tickets to North Dakota State football?" Because I listened and I documented it. And sometimes sellers I see, or people in business, relationship building, they document what they want to document, what impacts them. I document what impacts the other client. And a lot of times we're going to talk about something that has nothing to do with what I'm doing. And to me, those are how we create these uncommon experiences. And I always said, I always want the tool to manage me, not me manage the tool. And there's phrases that say, you manage the day, don't let the day manage you. So literally, I mean, I joke in the book that my colleagues call me a mother effing robot because I was so regimented of email on one screen. The second screen was just the activities function of who I was calling, why I was calling them. And I would let the previous call of whatever I talked to that person about drive the conversation I'm about to have. And not like selling something, but curiosity. And so I think sellers, once you stop realizing that you're the problem, because of the words we're telling ourselves this, and just embrace it, you'll find success. And you got to commit to it. It's a habit. Um, but yeah, I'm definitely a pro CRM guy because I know it worked. And it wasn't a luck or fluke that I was a top rep 10 years straight nationally. And I know that was one of the biggest tools that helped me do it.
Wow. So curiosity, listening. I'm not hearing salesmanship. I'm not hearing the power of negotiation. But perhaps that's because, right to your point, right? Those are relationship skills,
Hmm.
not necessarily salesmanship skills. So talk to me more about curiosity, Casey. How do you cultivate your curiosity, man?
Curiosity is a superpower. It is an absolute superpower. I got called by this guy named John. He said I was one of the most unconscious competent people he's ever trained. I said, that does not sound good, John. He goes, it is good. I'm just going to give you tools to teach what you do. And so it helped me be very consciously competent about um, asking the right questions and being prepared and not asking one question and then selling, but truly being curious and not being afraid to be curious and letting my vulnerability, my humility drive that curiosity even further with genuine interest in my tone. Like, wow, tell me more about that. Describe why that is. Tell me what happens if we don't achieve that. Like, dig deep because you truly want to care about them. Every elite seller I've ever met, they're all curious. Walt Disney, there's a quote I found. He said, curiosity is what essentially drove them to keep having success. Disney's done pretty well. I might be a business we might want to copy. You being in Orlando, that might be something to, I don't like recreating the wheel, right? And Curiosity. There's a guy named Orson Swett Martin who I researched when I write in the book. He was in the 1800s. He was curious. Voltaire, he might have been a little sexist back in the day, so I'll bring him more of current. He said, a man or woman, ladies, I got your back. A man or a woman is not judged by his or her answers, but by his or her questions. So curiosity was in 1700s, 1800s. Now we're in the 2000s. Why are we going away from it? It works. When I go, any meeting I go on, I'm looking for 2 words, Phil. I want the client, prospect, the person I'm meeting with to say, man, great question. And when I hear that, I know I made them think. And if I made them think, I know I just differentiated myself. And I provided space for me to ask a great question so they could respond. Too often, I don't know if you've seen this, but sellers will ask 2 or 3 questions inside of one question, which tells me they're hearing. Hey, Phil, how's your day? What have you been up to? And how's the family? Well, which one do you want me to answer? You asked me 3 questions right there. Just ask one. Shut the hell up.
Yeah. Yeah. The power to shut the hell up is a big one, man. I'll tell you, as important as listening is, it's equally as important, at least in my opinion, to shut up and be there first, right? Before we listen, we got to shut up, man. Like, let people think it, or let them respond. Let them be present with their own words, with their own thoughts, with their own ideas.
Yeah, you ruin a great question by talking. And sometimes I find sellers or sales leaders, sales leaders will sometimes give the answer too soon versus asking a question back, which is like, following the Socratic method of leadership, or asking a question and that uncomfortableness of just sitting and staring at them. That's something we can practice, sellers, believe it or not. I know that word practice scares us because we don't want to role play, because we don't sound bad in front of the customer. We only sound bad when we role play and practice because we're that perfect and elite. Wrong. We all got gaps. We all have gaps.
Absolutely. Yeah, we all have gaps. So let's pivot a bit, and then I promise we'll come back to the book, man. But we
No
talked
worries.
kind of in the green screen here about Ted Lasso. Believe, right? Believe. I think that is also a superpower for salespeople. Believe. So how are you finding that, Casey? I mean, now that you're doing some sales coaching and you're out of maybe the directness of, or at least the daily grind of sales. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you find believe shows up in the folks that you coach, that you work with?
Is one of my favorite things I talk about. I ask. It's a theme, since it's behind me, where it is right there. Um, because as a seller, if you don't believe what you do matters, if you don't believe what the service or product you have solves a problem, like truly believe, you're not going to be successful. So figure out a way to learn how to believe in it. Like ask questions to your boss, your team. Like make sure you understand the problem that exists, the problem that you solve, and how this really applies to the marketplace, where we might have done it before with proof, case studies. And what I love having the sign up behind me, Phil, is when I'll be coaching someone and I can tell their confidence might have got rattled. And I'll be like, if I was role playing with you, I'd say, hey, Phil, tell me what's changed. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, well, a month ago, you told me you believe what you do matters. You told me you believe what you're doing. And I don't see it anymore. So tell me what's changed. And I'll just look at them. They're like, well, shut up. I do believe that. Then you have the confidence then to ask any question you want, because you're coming from a spot of curiosity, authenticity, genuine interest, and care for someone. And if you believe in it, then go ask them, because someone's going to do it, right? Someone's going to ask that question. And sometimes it's going to be that elite seller. Or if you don't want to ask it because you don't believe, then don't be frustrated when your competitor goes and asks that same question, because they will.
If your competitor cares enough to ask the question, they'll care enough to eat your lunch.
Oh yeah. And take your milk
So
money.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So let's you mentioned the word authenticity, and I'll tell you, authenticity, until it got really kind of stolen away by the folks digitally. Oh, be authentic. Which I hate, right? But I think authenticity is super important here. And you talk about in the book that we got to ditch the ego, be vulnerable, and improve authenticity. So how do we do that, man? Our sellers, aren't we supposed to be, well, come on, man, I'm the best. I'm the greatest of all time, right? I'm Muhammad Ali. So what's sounds like a disconnect, man.
I totally, yeah. So can I talk about the worst piece of advice now?
Oh, absolutely. Hit me.
Okay.
Worst piece of advice.
The worst piece of advice is fake it till you make it. I can't stand that. I absolutely can't stand it. It drives me nuts, because client's going to feel it. You're telling if you fake it till you make it, you're telling yourself you have to be someone you're not. You have to be this perfect person, which doesn't exist. You have to be this, Muhammad Ali, Incredible Hulk, Rowdy Piper for the old school 80s wrestlers out there, which doesn't exist. Right. And so when you can slow down to say, hey, I don't understand that, Mr. Clay. Tell me more about that. Everybody started somewhere. And I found over time in my selling career, when I would slow down to ask questions, the client enjoyed it because it gave them a chance to talk about themselves. Right. Corny dad joke coming. The number one reason to be yourself is because everybody else is already taken. Right. And so, maybe it was a gift, maybe it was pure luck after 25 years in corporate, but I could get away with saying some random stuff because I was myself. They could hear it in my voice. They could hear it in the tone. They could hear it in my body. They could see it in my body language. And I think when you truly are yourself, you leave people feeling, that was different. That was fun. Because everybody loves a laugh. As we learned in Ted Lasso, everybody cries. I was a crier in Ted Lasso. Watched it twice, still cried.
Game on. Yep.
Right. And I just think it's so much easier to figure out, just be good at one person. That's you. Don't try to be the Casey at work, the Casey at home, the Casey in the locker room, the Casey at the library, the Casey at the restaurant. Just be yourself. I just find, it sounds simple, but people don't do it. Right.
Yeah.
A lot of these things, like these common sense things I have a lot of passion for, people don't do. I don't know why. And I'm on a mission to change it.
Awesome. So with that, right, being ourselves, vulnerability, right? I cry, you cry. Cool, right? That's who we are. That's important. But talk to me more about vulnerability. Vulnerability, because I will tell you, I see a lot of people equate vulnerability and weakness, and I cannot. That just drives me insane.
Mm-hmm.
I think that couldn't be more different. So, how do you define vulnerability, Casey?
The vulnerability is one. We have to realize that if I have to tell you how good I am, Phil, I'm not that good. When I'm great, you'll tell me. That takes vulnerability. It takes humility. Vulnerability is the belief to ask a question when I know I don't know what the hell we're talking about. I can shake my head up and down and pretend to know. The vulnerability to share a story about, like, when he was still alive. I openly had a conversation with a client, and she was like, Casey, how you doing? I'm like, I was great. 47 minutes later in the call, I said, hey, Megan, much love to Megan McCann. I know she'll let me saying the story. I said, I just lied to you. And my apologies. She's like, what do you mean you lied to me? I said, 47 minutes ago, you asked me how I was doing. I'm doing, pardon my French, doing shitty. I'm not doing good. So sorry, we have to bleep that out. And that's BS. If I'm teaching vulnerability, yet I'm not walking the walk, that's BS. And so I'm not doing good. My dad's in hospice. He's about to pass away. And I should share that with you, right? You don't know my dad, but if I'm being vulnerable and being myself, and it's funny, like that alone, when I think about like podcast episodes I've done, or in that experience, motivated me to write an article called The Final Whistle, which was a tribute to my dad about like a football metaphor of like compete to the final whistle, because I was there before his last breath. And that was like one of my most downloaded episodes ever. And not because that wasn't the goal. The goal was just to be vulnerable and share that. And if I can inspire someone else that has a parent or loved one going through dementia or Alzheimer's, or they're caring for them, which was brutally tough. 15 plus years, my wife and I did that. To me, that's like walking the walk of vulnerability right there. And again, I'm comfortable with, I know I'm not going to win everybody in life, but when I'm vulnerable, I'm humble, I'm grounded, I'm going to win more people than I'm going to lose. I know.
So as I'm hearing you talk about that, to me, it seems like vulnerability is really just not being honest with people, just telling them where you are, truly, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what's important, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I yak on you and tell you, how awful my marriage is. It's not, by the way, but I mean, right? If it is, right, that's not what I'm talking. What you're talking about, you're just, you know what, I'm not doing great, and here's why, and once that's out there, I might argue that now we can talk about things,
Mm-hmm.
because as as a seller, as a husband, as a leader, if we go first, you make it safe for others to go first, or to go second. I mean, right? The principle of the first follower, right? We have to go first, because otherwise there's nobody. No, they're not going to
Mm-hmm.
follow. Or is that what you've seen as well?
Totally. I tell the leaders all the time, I said, as a theme of practice, go first, leaders. Don't expect your team to role play if you're not going to role play with them. It's BS, right? I always say, go first, be the servant leader. I talk about in that same vein of going first, humility, have a boomerang mindset. If you throw a boomerang well, it's going to come back to you. So serve others, but don't keep score. Do not keep score. Now, someone might say, what? That's kind of naive. Well, it's worked for 46 years of life. I got boomerangs coming back to me every morning by doing unto others as I want to do to myself, which is why I wrote about that. I passionate about that when we were 3 or 4 years old. Our parents taught us to treat people with respect and be nice. Yet we get in corporate America where for some reason that changes and we can be a-holes to everybody and yell at our admin and be rude to finance and expect unrealistic things from our team versus just be a freaking human being and meet people where they are and remove fear and lead by example. And that's, to me, the best leaders I ever had were vulnerable and humble, which is my equation for leadership. You talked earlier about, I think you said connection. I also, when I think about connecting with people through vulnerability and humility, it's when I can find something to connect with on, which takes curiosity, that then develops rapport. Rapport leads to trust. Trust leads to relationship. So the number of times when I posted that story about my dad on LinkedIn, Phil, I had, I don't even know, 20 plus messages come from people I didn't even know who they were. Hey, man, I'm going through the same thing. Thanks for having the balls to put yourself out there. And I wasn't doing it for like a hug or a high five or oh, sweet, I got 13 likes. I'm awesome. I did it for myself, almost like therapy, like in therapy. And then, but what I found, it ended up serving others. And that was like the best feeling ever.
Yeah. So that's interesting, right? We don't do those things for likes, as you're saying, right? That's not the point of all this stuff. But it's so interesting that people then fake it. Like, have you are you on Instagram, Casey?
Yes. Yes. Not like a 83 stories a day person, but
Yeah,
more
thank
a
goodness,
casual.
right? Yeah. So if you ever follow the best of LinkedIn, that's an account, and I don't know if you've ever seen it, but you got to take a look. It
I
is
will.
people who make up stories that then this best of LinkedIn is like calling out. The other day was talking about some lesson that somebody posted that was about how their kid, like the sand like kept washing it away, and eventually they built this wonderful castle. And on the second slide, and like then they showed this picture of this amazing castle, and on the second slide they showed that was like the number one hit in Google for sand castles. So the person completely made it up just for ego. So it's so interesting that you talk about that, right? Because that's not vulnerability.
Mm-mm.
That's ginned up garbage. That's faking it until you make it. So
Mm-hmm.
so how do we, other than vulnerability, right? You talk about vulnerability plus humility equals leadership. How do we help our teams do that better, Casey? I mean, you were a top seller. How do we,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe how do we manage up to help our sales leader better do that, man? Because I really think that's important.
1000%. So I met a guy named John Hunter, and he and I wrote an article together, which was a very fun process called about how to remove fear from the workplace. We did that earlier, like maybe a year ago. And it was just a fun little project to do. It's funny to me when I hear leaders talk about, yeah, vulnerability is super important to us. We want people to be grounded, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, awesome. Tell me the last time you've talked about your gaps with your team. Tell me the last time you told the team where you sucked at something. Tell me the last time you told your team about your biggest failure. And if I get a blank stare, which I do a lot, I say, I hate to call you out, but there's not vulnerability here. Because if you're not leading from the front, bro, it ain't here. So I would challenge you if you want to, because that's what good leaders do. Good leaders don't talk about how, look at me, I'm amazing. I like leading with stories of failure to make myself more relatable to people because I feel like people learn more from my gaps than my success. And so I think that would be an easy takeaway from people listening to this today is when you think about a gap or you think about a time you struggled, slow down and then use that to ask your team, hey, have I told you about a time where I struggled? I would be willing to bet a lot of money that your teams would be like, no, but I'd love to learn more. And people don't slow down to think about that, which when you do, you go really fast and your team is now energized. They feel connected. So I think that would be the easiest way to do it is just lead with your own gaps.
Yeah. I love what you said there. And actually wrote that on my notebook here. People learn more from our gaps than from our wins. That's a great reminder, man, that we need to share more of that. We need to be more vulnerable. So that absolutely helps us win relationships. It absolutely helps us, to steal old Dale Carnegie's words, right? To win friends and influence people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great way for leaders to start.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we're not in a leadership position.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be more vulnerable, maybe with our prospects. Where do we start, Casey? How do we start along that path?
I can give a real world example this week. Um, I I am new. Coaching found me, Phil. I did not. I mean, when I first started coaching executives, sales leaders, sales teams, people said, "Hey, do you coach?" I'm like, "Yeah, my kids." And they're like, "No, adults." I'm like, "Well, it's not really what I do." But then I thought, like, "What? Well, why wouldn't I?" And so I had a client recently that was asking me to do a lot, and I'm in a role where I'm kind of blind leading the blind. And so I said to this prospect, I said, "Hey, listen, there's three things you're asking for. One, I know really, really well how to carve it out. The two other things you're asking for, I know I can help solve those problems for you. But I'm looking to lead through my own vulnerability and humility, which is what I'm teaching your team. And I'm humble enough to tell you that I don't know the perfect response to this. I'm vulnerable to know that I need your help. I'm asking for you. Don't take advantage of me because I got a lot of experience that can help your teams. And let's meet in the middle and talk this out so we both win." She was like, "That is so refreshing. Thank you. I totally want to do that." Because if she gouges me and works me down to like 38 cents an hour, well, I'm not going to feel motivated to win. And if she feels like I crushed her, she's not going to be willing to work with me. And so I said, let's work together. And so we talked through, and it was like the best. But I mean, it turned into a little bit of a negotiation. That was not my goal. My goal was to lead with my own humility and vulnerability to connect with her. And I think that's what people aren't doing enough of. Right. And when I say win the relationship, not the deal, what cracks me up sometimes is people say, "Why don't you want to win deals? What are you, an idiot?" I'm like, you don't get it. That's the point. If you win people, deals will always be there. They're always going to be there. And that whole mindset also requires us, Phil, to say no sometimes and walk away from a deal, even when you know you want it and it's the quarters at the end and your boss is putting pressure and you're like, "Oh my God, I want to do this." That's the power of this mindset, I believe, that I've proven works. I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody, but I'm saying it's worked for me, people in my life, people I coach. And so I don't know, hope that answers your question. That came to mind right away when you asked me that.
Yeah, no, it totally does. It totally does. Admitting what we're great at is easy. Admitting what we're not so great at takes vulnerability. And doing that, right, connects us to people. It helps us win relationships. So I totally dig that, man. I think that's really important and a really great lesson for folks. And I would encourage folks, pick the book up, right? It's Win the Relationship, Not the Deal. Casey Jacox is our guide today. Just check it out, friends. It's a simple read, but it's a powerful read. There's a lot in there. So, Casey, if people want to connect to
Mm-hmm.
you, if they want to spend a little time with you, get to know you a little bit better. I know you've got a podcast. I know you blog. I see you on LinkedIn. But where would you send them? I know obviously you can send them everywhere, but give us a spot or two where if they want to get connected with you, that they should do that fast.
Yeah, you said the answer there. LinkedIn is what I'm very active on. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. I love interacting with people. I love reading stuff that's out there. The other one is just my website directly. It's just caseyjacox.com. It's newly built. Shout out to Stan Hall. He calls himself the Rambo of creative, which I love. And he and I are going to be working together this afternoon doing some video production work. But that I would think that's the best way. I have some testimonials on there, which are obviously very humbling to read, but that would be the best way. And I encourage everybody, if you want to connect, show me that you did a little research. Though that's my call to action, I guess, for people. I love connecting with people when they just show a little bit of effort, like they've done some research, right? I do it. I make sure I connect with people, and so like I had. Sorry, I'm going to go on a tangent here real quick, but it's important to know. This person said, "Casey, with your background, I'd love to help you write your first book." I already wrote it. Why? No, thanks. I'm out. It's like, I don't want to connect with people like that. I want to connect with people that show a little curiosity, and then it makes me want to learn about you. So anyway, you got me fired up by that question. So
No, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I get those all the time as well. So get to know Casey a little bit. Go to caseyjacox.com. That's CASEYJACOX.com. Get to know him. Get yourself a copy of the book, Win the Relationship, Not the Deal, and be vulnerable, friends. If you're looking for a place to start, Casey mentioned vulnerability. I can't tell you enough how important that is if you want to be successful in sales, in leadership, or in life. Casey, thanks so much for spending a little time with me today, man. Really good stuff. I really appreciate it.
You're an awesome guy. You're an awesome host. Thanks for making it easy on me today.